This is the story of saloon girls and the shocking secrets they kept hidden behind their painted smiles. Hollywood gave us one version of these frontier women, but the reality was far more complex, dangerous, and surprisingly sophisticated than any movie dared to show. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about the Wild West's most famous entertainers. The illusion of glamour. Picture this. You're walking down the dusty main street of a frontier town after weeks on the cattle trail. The sun has set, casting long shadows between ramshackle buildings, and then you see it, warm light spilling from the saloon doors, accompanied by the tinkling of piano keys and the sound of feminine laughter. Through the bat-winged doors, you catch glimpses of women in vibrant silk dresses, their faces painted and glowing, hair arranged in elaborate styles that would make a city socialite weep with envy. These were the saloon girls, and from a distance of about 50 feet and through a haze of whiskey fumes, they looked absolutely magnificent. Unfortunately for the cowboys stumbling through those doors, they were about to discover that frontier glamour was roughly as authentic as a $3 bill. The truth about saloon girls was far more complex than Hollywood's romantic portrayal suggests. These weren't fallen angels waiting for redemption by the right cowboy. They were businesswomen operating in one of the few professions where a woman could earn decent money on the frontier, which naturally meant the work was considerably more dangerous and demanding than your average office job today. But here's where it gets interesting, and why their secrets remained hidden for so long. These women were masters of illusion, creating beauty and sophistication from practically nothing in towns where running water was a luxury and a mirror was a precious commodity. They transformed themselves nightly from ordinary frontier women into glittering stars, using tricks that would impress a modern makeup artist, though the ingredients they worked with might have horrified one. What we're about to uncover goes far beyond the typical life was hard in the Old West narrative. These women developed an entire system of survival that relied on psychology, chemistry, business acumen, and no small amount of courage. They created personas, managed finances, navigated dangerous social waters, and somehow maintained their health and sanity in environments that would challenge a modern emergency room nurse. The question isn't whether their lives were difficult. Of course they were. The question is how they managed to not only survive, but often thrive in circumstances that would have broken many of their male contemporaries. And more intriguingly, how did so many of them manage to completely reinvent themselves afterward, leaving behind their saloon days like a discarded costume? Their secrets died with them, but the evidence remains if you know where to look. In old photographs where the lighting seems just a bit too flattering, in newspaper accounts that mention mysterious benefactors funding schools and orphanages, in family histories that contain curious gaps about grandmother's early years. To becoming prettier. The art of frontier transformation. Creating beauty on the frontier required the ingenuity of a chemist and the creativity of an artist, mainly because actual cosmetics were about as common as indoor plumbing. Which is to say, not at all. The foundation of any saloon girl's transformation began with her complexion, and unfortunately for her, the 19th century beauty standard demanded skin as pale as fresh snow. This presented certain challenges when you lived in a place where the sun beat down mercilessly and dust storms could sandblast the paint off a barn door. Enter the wonderful world of DIY cosmetics, which makes modern beauty tutorials look positively safe by comparison. Rice powder mixed with cornstarch provided a base for face powder, though the more ambitious might splurge on actual store-bought powder containing lead and mercury, because nothing says beautiful like slowly poisoning yourself with heavy metals. The logic was simple: better to look stunning while dying than to look healthy while living. For those seeking that coveted porcelain complexion, some women applied solutions containing arsenic or white lead directly to their faces. The immediate results were reportedly quite striking: smooth, luminous skin that practically glowed in candlelight. The long-term results were somewhat less appealing, involving symptoms like hair loss, tooth decay, and the occasional bout of madness. But beauty has always required sacrifice. And apparently some women were willing to sacrifice their sanity for the right shade of pale. Lips presented their own creative challenge. Commercial rouge was expensive and often unavailable, so resourceful women turned to nature's pharmacy. Crushed berries, strawberries, cherries, or elderberries provided natural color when mixed with animal fat to help it adhere. For a longer lasting effect, some used red clay or even brick dust mixed with lard. The more daring experimented with cinnabar, which created a lovely bright red color and happened to be pure mercury sulfide. Once again, the beauty industry's relationship with toxic substances proved remarkably consistent across centuries. Eyes received perhaps the most dramatic treatment. Kohl made from soot, charcoal, or lamp black was applied liberally around the eyes to create that smoky, mysterious look that supposedly drove men wild. Some women burned cork to create their own eyeliner, while others used ground antimony, a metallic element that created beautiful dark colors and occasional blindness. For eyebrows, a mixture of soot and animal fat could darken and define, though the smell probably wasn't particularly romantic. The real magic, however, happened with hair. A saloon girl's elaborate hairstyle was her crown, and maintaining it required engineering skills that would impress a modern architect. Most women couldn't wash their hair more than once a week, if that, so dry cleaning became an art form. Cornmeal, flour, or even ground orris root was worked through the hair to absorb oils and odors, then brushed out along with most of the evidence of frontier living. But wait, there's more to this story of transformation, and it involves undergarments that could literally reshape a woman's body. The secrets of creating an hourglass figure from pioneer stock are coming up, and they're more extreme than you might imagine. The architecture of allure. If you thought modern shapewear was uncomfortable, you clearly haven't experienced the medieval torture device known as a Victorian corset. These contraptions didn't just modify a woman's figure, they fundamentally reconstructed her entire torso into something that would make an anatomist weep. The goal was mathematically simple: create the smallest possible waist while maximizing the bust and hips. The execution was considerably more complex and involved what can only be described as deliberate bodily reconstruction. A properly laced corset could reduce a woman's waist by 4 to 6 inches, creating that coveted hourglass silhouette that supposedly drove frontier men to distraction. Unfortunately, this required compressing the internal organs into new and exciting configurations. The stomach was pushed upward, the liver relocated, and the lungs learned to function in significantly reduced space. Women literally had to relearn how to breathe, taking shallow breaths from the upper chest rather than the deeper breathing that actually provides adequate oxygen. This explains why Victorian ladies were always fainting. They were essentially walking around in a state of mild suffocation. The corset also served as a sort of portable back brace, which was helpful when you spent your evenings dancing with cowboys who had consumed their body weight in rot-gut whiskey. It provided structure and support, though at the cost of any ability to bend naturally at the waist. Picking something up off the floor required a full knee bend maneuver that would have impressed a yoga instructor, but the corset was just the beginning. The bustle, that cage-like contraption that extended the dress behind a woman, was engineering genius disguised as fashion. Early bustles were relatively modest affairs, but by the height of their popularity, they resembled small architectural projects. Some extended nearly 2 feet behind the wearer, creating a shelf-like projection that could theoretically serve as a small table. The practical implications were staggering. Sitting required careful calculation and backing into chairs like a ship docking. Doorways became navigational challenges. And heaven help the woman who needed to use an outhouse while wearing full bustle regalia. It was like trying to maneuver a small building into a phone booth. Yet somehow, saloon girls made this elaborate architecture look effortless. They danced, served drinks, and charmed customers while essentially wearing a combination of medieval torture device and furniture. The physical stamina required was extraordinary, though it's worth noting that many of these women removed their corsets during the day, only cinching themselves into fashionable shape for evening performances. The dresses themselves told their own story of calculated allure. While respectable women wore high necklines and long sleeves, saloon girls pushed boundaries with lower necklines, shorter sleeves, and hemlines that occasionally revealed, scandalously, an ankle or even a flash of stocking. The colors were deliberately bold, brilliant reds, deep purples, emerald greens that could be seen across a smoky saloon and distinguished from the drab browns and grays worn by proper ladies. Accessories completed the transformation. Feathers in the hair suggested exotic birds and faraway places. Cheap jewelry, often made of brass or glass but designed to catch the light, created an impression of wealth and sophistication. Gloves covered work-roughened hands, while fans became props for flirtation and tools for creating mystery. But all this physical transformation was just the foundation. The real magic happened when these elaborately costumed women opened their mouths and began to work their psychological magic on unsuspecting customers. The art of frontier flirtation was about to begin, and it was more sophisticated than most modern dating advice. Flirting as a weapon. The psychology of frontier seduction. Modern dating apps have nothing on the psychological warfare conducted nightly in frontier saloons. These women understood male psychology with the precision of a scientist and the cunning of a general planning a campaign. Their weapons weren't looks alone, though those helped, but rather a sophisticated understanding of how to make a man feel like he was the most fascinating person who had ever walked through those bat-wing doors. The foundation of their technique was attention, delivered with the concentrated force of a magnifying glass focusing sunlight. When a saloon girl looked at a customer, she didn't just glance. She studied him with the intensity of a scholar examining a rare manuscript. Eye contact was maintained just long enough to suggest genuine interest, but not so long as to seem desperate. It was a delicate balance between availability and selectivity. Laughter was deployed with surgical precision, not the polite tittering of respectable ladies, but hearty, genuine-sounding amusement at even the most pedestrian jokes. Cowboys who hadn't heard a woman laugh at their wit in months suddenly felt like they could conquer the world. The fact that these women had heard the same tired jokes from 100 previous customers was irrelevant. Each man believed he was uniquely hilarious. Physical touch was perhaps their most powerful tool, used sparingly but effectively. A hand briefly placed on a forearm while laughing, fingers that lingered just a moment too long when passing a drink, a gentle adjustment of a man's collar or hat. These tiny contacts created electricity in men starved for feminine attention. The key was making each touch seem spontaneous and natural, never calculated or transactional. But the real genius lay in their ability to make men feel important. After months of being ordered around by trail bosses, dealing with stubborn cattle, and sleeping under the stars, a cowboy craved respect and admiration. Saloon girls became experts at finding something, anything to praise about their customers. Whether it was their riding skills, their courage, their generosity, or simply their choice in boots, they found ways to build up egos that had been ground down by frontier hardships. Conversation became an art form. These women developed encyclopedic knowledge about cattle drives, mining, farming, and whatever industries brought men to their particular corner of the frontier. They could discuss the challenges of finding water on the trail, sympathize about difficult bosses, and offer informed opinions about market prices. This wasn't accidental. It was professional development that would make modern sales training look elementary. The dance floor provided the ultimate opportunity for controlled intimacy. Here, respectable social contact allowed for maximum psychological impact. A skilled saloon girl could convey availability while maintaining propriety, creating a sense of special connection through carefully choreographed movement. The swish of skirts, a flash of stocking, the pressure of a hand guiding a clumsy partner, all of it designed to create memories that would keep men coming back night after night. But perhaps their most sophisticated technique was the creation of hope. Not false promises exactly, but the suggestion that with enough time, money, and devotion, something more meaningful might develop. This required remarkable emotional intelligence, reading each man's particular fantasies and feeding them just enough encouragement to keep the money flowing without ever making commitments that couldn't be kept. Yet behind all this calculated charm lay a constant awareness of danger. These women were walking a tightrope between being alluring enough to succeed and becoming so appealing that men became possessive or violent. The skills they developed weren't just about attraction, they were about survival in an environment where the wrong word to the wrong customer could prove fatal. Speaking of survival, maintaining this level of performance night after night required more than just psychological stamina. It required solving some very practical problems, starting with the most basic challenge of all, staying clean in a world where soap was luxury and hot water was a minor miracle. The hygiene battle, staying fresh in a filthy world. If you think maintaining your appearance is challenging today, try doing it in a town where the main street doubles as a sewer and the local water supply comes from the same creek where horses relieve themselves upstream. For saloon girls, cleanliness wasn't just about comfort, it was about economic survival. A woman who smelled like a cattle drive wasn't going to earn much in tips, regardless of how charming her conversation. The fundamental problem was water. While cowboys might go weeks without a proper bath, saloon girls needed to maintain the illusion of refinement nightly. This meant getting creative with limited resources and making every drop count. A full bath in a proper tub was a luxury reserved for special occasions or particularly profitable evenings. Most nights, they relied on what polite society called bird baths, strategic cleaning with basins, washcloths, and whatever hot water they could scrounge up. The technique was methodical, face first, then hands and arms, followed by a careful washing of areas that would be exposed during the evening's performances. This wasn't about getting completely clean, it was about removing the most offensive evidence of frontier living. Soap, when available, was typically homemade lye soap that could strip paint, and frequently did similar things to skin. The lucky establishments might have actual store-bought soap, but more often, women made do with mixtures of ash water and animal fat that technically qualified as cleansing agents. The smell was approximately as romantic as it sounds, which explains why perfume became such a crucial investment. Speaking of perfume, the frontier version bore little resemblance to the delicate floral waters preferred by Eastern ladies. Saloon girls needed industrial-strength scent that could compete with tobacco smoke, spilled whiskey, and the general aroma of men who thought bathing was a sign of weakness. Rose water, lavender oil, or violet extract were applied with generous enthusiasm. Some women created their own signature scents by mixing various oils and alcohol, essentially becoming their own perfume manufacturers out of necessity. Hair presented its own unique challenges. Weekly washing was optimistic. Bi-weekly was more realistic. The solution was dry cleaning techniques that would make a modern stylist reach for the smelling salts. Cornmeal, flour, or ground orris root was worked through the hair to absorb oils and odors, then brushed out with whatever bristle brush was available. The process was time-consuming and messy, but it could extend the life of a hairstyle by several days. For emergency freshening between customers, many women kept small sachets of dried herbs, lavender, rosemary, or mint, tucked into their corsets or bustles. These provided subtle fragrance and could be squeezed to release fresh scent when needed. Some enterprising women even sewed small pockets into their undergarments specifically for this purpose. But here's where it gets interesting. The better establishments actually invested in their employees' hygiene. Successful madams understood that clean, attractive women earned more money, which meant higher profits for everyone. They might provide communal bathing facilities, ensure adequate soap supplies, or even employ someone whose primary job was maintaining the cleanliness standards necessary for business success. Now, before you start feeling too sorry for these women struggling with frontier hygiene, remember that they were solving problems that would challenge modern urban planners. They were creating beauty and sophistication in conditions that would make a modern germaphobe faint. And they were doing it while navigating significantly more serious threats to their health and safety. Which brings us to a topic that most history books politely skip over. These women weren't just battling dirt and bad odors. They were fighting a daily war against diseases that could end their careers or their lives. The methods they used for protection would shock you, and some of them were nearly as dangerous as the diseases they were trying to prevent. But first, let me ask you something. Which of these hygiene challenges surprised you the most? The homemade soap that could strip paint? Or the fact that some saloons actually invested in employee cleanliness as a business strategy? Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about these frontier beauty battles. And if you're enjoying these stories about the real Wild West, the parts they never show in movies, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got plenty more shocking secrets from America's frontier days, including some medical practices that will make you appreciate modern healthcare in ways you never imagined. Protecting themselves from disease, a deadly game of chance. The diseases lurking in frontier saloons made modern food poisoning look like a minor inconvenience. We're talking about a time when syphilis, gonorrhea, and other infections could literally drive you insane or kill you, and the available treatments were often worse than the diseases themselves. Saloon girls were acutely aware that their profession put them at extraordinary risk. Unlike the cowboys who might face occasional exposure, these women dealt with the possibility of infection as a daily occupational hazard. The strategies they developed for protection ranged from surprisingly effective to absolutely horrifying, and sometimes both simultaneously. The more established houses employed doctors for regular examinations, though the term doctor should be understood rather loosely. Many frontier physicians had acquired their medical knowledge through apprenticeship, correspondence courses, or simply by declaring themselves qualified. Their diagnostic methods relied heavily on visual inspection and prayer, since microscopes and blood tests belonged to a future century. These medical examinations were crude affairs conducted with minimal privacy and maximum humiliation. Women were expected to submit to these inspections as a condition of employment, with the understanding that any sign of infection meant immediate dismissal and probable destitution. The irony, of course, was that the doctors conducting these examinations often knew less about disease transmission than the women they were examining. For contraception, the options were limited and expensive. The most reliable method was condoms made from sheep intestines, which were hand-sewn, reusable, and cost about as much as a cowboy's monthly wages. These had to be soaked before use, carefully cleaned afterward, and stored properly to prevent deterioration. Not exactly the height of convenience or romance, but considerably more effective than the alternatives. Women who couldn't afford proper contraception relied on folk remedies that ranged from questionable to dangerous. Vinegar douches were popular based on the theory that acid would kill whatever might cause problems. Some women used solutions of carbolic acid, the same stuff used to disinfect surgical instruments, which technically worked but also caused chemical burns that could be permanent. Herbal preparations promised protection through various plant-based concoctions that supposedly prevented or cured infections. These remedies were passed down through networks of women who shared information about what worked and what didn't. Some of these folk cures actually contained compounds that modern medicine recognizes as having antimicrobial properties, though the dosages and preparation methods were hit or miss affairs. The most tragic aspect was the treatment of established infections. Mercury was the go-to cure for syphilis, administered through pills, injections, or topical applications. The treatment process could take months and involved gradually poisoning the patient with heavy metals, hoping to kill the disease before killing the host. The side effects included tooth loss, brain damage, and various forms of madness, leading to the saying, "A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury." Women in this situation faced an impossible choice: endure the mercury treatment and risk insanity, or let the disease run its course and face certain death. Many chose the treatment and spent their final years in mental institutions, their minds destroyed by the very medicine that was supposed to save them. But here's what the history books rarely mention. These women developed sophisticated networks for sharing information about dangerous customers. They warned each other about men who showed signs of disease, who became violent when drinking, or who refused to take basic precautions. This informal intelligence network probably saved more lives than all the frontier doctors combined. The financial implications were staggering. Women who became infected faced not just health consequences, but economic ruin. Medical treatment consumed earnings, time away from work meant loss of income, and permanent damage could end a career entirely. Many women saved obsessively, knowing that their earning years were limited and that a single case of the wrong disease could destroy everything they'd built. Yet somehow, many of these women not only survived these risks, but managed to accumulate enough wealth to completely reinvent their lives. The financial tricks they used to maximize their earnings while minimizing their risks were sophisticated enough to impress modern investment advisors, and some of their scams were downright brilliant. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we reveal their money-making secrets, let me ask you this. Did you know that sheep intestine condoms were reusable, or that mercury treatment for syphilis often caused more damage than the disease itself? These medical realities were everyday concerns for frontier women. What other aspects of Old West healthcare do you think Hollywood got completely wrong? Keep watching to discover the ingenious financial schemes these women used to turn dangerous work into long-term security, some of which involved fooling customers so cleverly that the men never realized they'd been scammed. Tricks of the trade, the business of separating cowboys from their money. Modern sales techniques have nothing on the sophisticated psychological manipulation conducted nightly in frontier saloons. These women understood that their real product wasn't companionship or entertainment. It was the illusion of both, delivered at premium prices to men whose judgment was compromised by loneliness, alcohol, and months of social deprivation. The foundation of their success was the drinks racket, which operated on principles that would make modern bar owners weep with envy. When a cowboy bought a lady a drink, he was rarely purchasing actual alcohol. Instead, he was paying whiskey prices for what amounted to cold tea, colored water, or weak lemonade served in shot glasses. The markup was astronomical, probably around 2,000%, and the customer was none the wiser. The beauty of this system was its psychological sophistication. Men felt generous buying drinks for their charming companions. The women maintained their wits, while their customers grew increasingly impaired, and the house profits soared. A single evening of drinking with customers could net a woman more than a schoolteacher earned in a month, without consuming enough alcohol to impair her performance. Dance tickets represented another stroke of financial genius. Rather than charging for dances directly, many establishments sold tickets that customers purchased from the house, then gave to their chosen partners. This created multiple revenue streams. The house collected ticket sales. The women received a percentage of each ticket, and the system encouraged extended dancing since men had already invested in the tickets. But here's where it gets truly clever. Skilled saloon girls could make a single dance last an extraordinary length of time. Through strategic conversation, requests for water breaks, and the occasional twisted ankle that required careful attention, a woman could stretch one ticket into 15 minutes of billable time. Multiply this by a dozen customers per evening, and you're looking at serious money. Some women elevated the art of the long con to levels that would impress modern confidence artists. They created elaborate fictional personas, perhaps the abandoned daughter of a wealthy Eastern family, or a widow seeking a fresh start after tragedy. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were investment strategies designed to keep customers emotionally and financially engaged over extended periods. The most successful practitioners of this art understood that hope was their most valuable commodity. Not false promises exactly, but carefully managed expectations that suggested future possibilities for the right man with sufficient patience and financial commitment. A cowboy might spend his entire season's wages courting a woman who had perfected the art of being perpetually almost ready to commit to something more serious. Partnership arrangements with gamblers and other saloon operators created additional income streams. Some women served as spotters, identifying wealthy customers and their spending habits, then sharing this intelligence with card dealers who could adjust their games accordingly. Others worked as lures, attracting specific targets to high-stakes games where the odds were decidedly unfavorable. The most audacious schemes involved fake romantic competitions. Two women would appear to compete for the affections of a particularly wealthy customer, driving up spending as he tried to prove his worthiness through increasingly expensive gestures. The competition was entirely theatrical, with both women splitting the proceeds after their mark finally departed, convinced he had broken the heart of whichever woman he hadn't chosen. Property investment represented the long-term strategy that separated the truly successful women from those who merely survived. While their male customers spent their money on temporary pleasures, many saloon girls quietly accumulated real estate, business interests, and other assets that would provide security long after their performing days ended. But behind all these clever financial strategies lay a darker reality that historians often gloss over. The constant pressure to maintain performance while managing dangerous customers took a severe psychological toll, leading many women to seek relief through methods that created their own devastating problems. The coping mechanisms these women used to deal with stress reveal the hidden costs of frontier life, and some of their solutions were nearly as destructive as the problems they were trying to solve. The story gets much darker from here, involving addictions that destroyed lives and medical treatments that were essentially legalized poisoning. Addictions and hidden struggles, the price of survival. The glamorous image of saloon girls laughing and dancing through the night conceals a devastating truth. Many of these women were essentially functioning addicts, using legal substances to cope with psychological trauma that would challenge modern therapists. The medications and remedies available to them were often more dangerous than the problems they were meant to solve. Laudanum was the frontier's answer to anxiety, depression, pain relief, and sleeplessness. This mixture of opium dissolved in alcohol was available without prescription at any general store and was considered perfectly respectable medicine. A small bottle cost about the same as a good meal and promised relief from whatever troubled you. Unfortunately, it delivered that relief through the simple expedient of making you physically dependent on it. Women used laudanum to calm their nerves before difficult customers, to sleep after traumatic encounters, and to numb the physical and emotional pain that came with their profession. What started as occasional medicinal use quickly became daily necessity as their bodies adapted to the opium. Within weeks, women found themselves unable to function without their medicine, and increasing the dose became inevitable as tolerance developed. The withdrawal from laudanum dependency was described as feeling like dying while remaining conscious enough to experience every moment of the process. Women who tried to quit experienced violent tremors, hallucinations, and pain so severe that many chose to continue their addiction rather than endure the cure. Those who successfully broke free often relapsed during particularly stressful periods, creating a cycle of dependency that could last for years. Alcohol presented its own challenges, though these were often disguised as occupational requirements. Saloon girls were expected to drink with customers, creating social pressure to consume alcohol regularly while maintaining professional performance. Many women developed sophisticated techniques for appearing to drink while actually consuming very little, but others found themselves genuinely dependent on alcohol to manage the stress of their work. The combination of laudanum and alcohol created particularly dangerous dependencies. Both substances depress the central nervous system, and using them together increased the risk of accidental overdose. Women struggling with dual addictions faced nearly impossible recovery challenges, especially given the lack of understanding about addiction as a medical condition rather than a moral failing. Mercury treatments for disease created another form of systematic poisoning disguised as medical care. Women undergoing these treatments experienced symptoms that modern doctors would recognize as heavy metal poisoning, tremors, tooth loss, cognitive impairment, and personality changes. The irony was that the treatment often caused more suffering than the original disease, but medical authorities insisted it was necessary for cure. Some women turned to patent medicines that promised to cure everything from female complaints to nervous exhaustion. These tonics often contain dangerous combinations of alcohol, opium, cocaine, and various toxic compounds. Women seeking relief from legitimate medical problems unknowingly consumed substances that created new dependencies while failing to address their original concerns. The psychological toll of maintaining false personas night after night cannot be understated. Many women reported feeling disconnected from their authentic selves, as if they were constantly performing roles that bore no resemblance to their actual personalities. This emotional dissociation, while psychologically protective in the short term, often led to long-term difficulties forming genuine relationships or trusting their own feelings. Career longevity in this profession was brutally limited. Most women found their earning power peaked in their early 20s and declined rapidly thereafter. By 30, many were considered past their prime for saloon work, facing the terrifying prospect of starting over with limited skills and potentially serious health problems from years of substance use and occupational hazards. The successful ones understood this timeline and planned accordingly, saving money and developing exit strategies during their peak earning years. But others found themselves trapped by addiction, debt, or health problems that made starting fresh impossible. Some turned to operating their own establishments, using their experience to manage younger women. Others left the frontier entirely, seeking anonymity in distant cities where their past wouldn't follow them. Yet, despite these challenges, many saloon girls managed to completely reinvent themselves, leaving behind their frontier personas to become respectable wives, businesswomen, and community leaders. Their methods for accomplishing these transformations were often as elaborate and carefully planned as the performances that had made their new lives possible. The stories of successful reinvention reveal just how thoroughly these women understood the art of creating and maintaining false identities. Some of their transformations were so complete that their own children never learned about their mother's frontier days. Double lives and dirty secrets. The Great Disappearing Act. The most remarkable achievement of many saloon girls wasn't their success in the entertainment business. It was their ability to completely erase that success from their personal histories. These women became masters of reinvention, creating new identities so convincing that historians are still uncovering evidence of their double lives more than a century later. The process began with careful financial planning during their working years. While their customers spent money on immediate gratification, successful saloon girls invested in portable assets that could fund new lives elsewhere. Gold, jewelry, and cash were preferred over property or businesses that would tie them to specific locations. Some women maintained safety deposit boxes under assumed names in distant cities, creating escape funds that could finance complete life transformations. Geographic relocation was essential for successful reinvention. A woman couldn't simply change her persona in the same town where everyone knew her history. Instead, she would disappear from her familiar territory and resurface hundreds of miles away with a completely new background story. Train travel made this possible, allowing women to cross vast distances and emerge in communities where nobody questioned their claimed origins. The creation of new identities required remarkable attention to detail. Women studied the mannerisms, speech patterns, and cultural knowledge necessary to convincingly portray ladies from respectable backgrounds. They learned to modify their accents, acquired knowledge about regions they'd never visited, and memorized fictional family histories complete with plausible explanations for their current circumstances. Documentation in the 19th century was informal enough to make identity changes feasible. Birth certificates were uncommon, official records were scarce, and personal identification relied heavily on community knowledge and verbal testimony. A woman with sufficient confidence and preparation could present herself as a widow from a distant state, a teacher seeking new opportunities, or the daughter of deceased parents seeking a fresh start. Marriage represented the ultimate transformation for many women, providing not just new names but entirely new social positions. Some women actively sought widowers or bachelors who valued companionship over extensive background investigations. Others used their savings to present themselves as financially independent women of mystery, attracting men who were more interested in their apparent wealth than their origins. The psychological challenges of maintaining false identities were substantial. Women had to suppress their real personalities, avoid references to their actual experiences, and constantly remember details of their fictional backgrounds. Some kept written records of their assumed histories to avoid contradictions, while others practiced their new personas so thoroughly that the performances became psychological reality. Business ventures provided another path to respectability and financial security. Women used their accumulated capital and customer service experience to open boarding houses, restaurants, or retail establishments. Their understanding of male psychology, honed through years of professional interaction, often translated into remarkable business acumen that impressed their new communities. Some women became philanthropists, using their wealth to fund churches, schools, or charitable organizations. These good works served multiple purposes. They demonstrated respectability, provided social connections with influential community members, and created positive legacies that deflected questions about their financial resources' origins. The most successful reinventions involved women who managed to marry into prominent families, becoming respected community leaders whose frontier past remained completely hidden. Their children grew up as members of society's upper echelons, never suspecting that their refined mothers had once worked in saloons. Some of these family secrets weren't revealed until decades later, when historical researchers uncovered connections that shocked descendants who had always believed in their family's impeccable respectability. Evidence of these transformations occasionally surfaces in historical records, property deeds showing unexplained wealth accumulation by single women, marriage records that don't quite align with claimed backgrounds, or philanthropic contributions that seem disproportionate to documented income sources. These anomalies represent the traces left by women who nearly succeeded in erasing their own histories. But the most telling evidence may be the family photographs that survive from the late 1800s and early 1900s. Look closely at those formal portraits of respectable Victorian families, and you might notice something in the eyes of certain matriarchs, a worldly awareness that seems inconsistent with sheltered domestic life, a hint of knowledge about human nature that respectable ladies weren't supposed to possess. The price of glamour. The saloon girls of the American frontier created one of history's most sophisticated illusions: the transformation of survival into entertainment, desperation into allure, and danger into profit. Behind every painted smile and swishing skirt was a businesswoman operating in one of the most challenging work environments imaginable, using psychology, chemistry, and sheer determination to succeed where failure often meant destitution or death. Their legacy extends far beyond the stereotypes perpetuated by Hollywood westerns. These women were pioneers in their own right, developing techniques for personal branding, customer psychology, and financial management that would impress modern entrepreneurs. They created beauty from nothing, manufactured charm under pressure, and built wealth in an economy that offered women few legitimate paths to financial independence. The cost of their success was measured in more than money. The physical toll of maintaining artificial appearances, the psychological strain of constant performance, and the health risks inherent in their profession created challenges that would overwhelm most people. Yet many not only survived, but thrived, accumulating enough wealth and wisdom to completely reinvent themselves when their performing days ended. Perhaps most remarkably, they managed to do all this while maintaining the fiction that their work was simply entertainment. The elaborate systems they created for maximizing revenue, protecting their health, and planning for the future reveal a level of business sophistication that contradicts every stereotype about fallen women lacking intelligence or ambition. Their stories remind us that the American frontier was built by people who found ways to survive and prosper under impossible circumstances. The saloon girls who painted their faces with berry juice and arsenic, who learned to flirt like weapons specialists, and who saved their earnings to buy respectability in distant towns, were as much pioneers as any cowboy or homesteader. The next time you see a classic Western, remember that the real women who inspired those characters were far more complex, intelligent, and resourceful than their fictional portrayals suggest. They were entrepreneurs, psychologists, chemists, and escape artists, all rolled into one, operating businesses that would challenge modern executives while navigating social and physical dangers that most of us can barely imagine. Their greatest achievement may have been their disappearance, not just from the saloons, but from history itself. By successfully reinventing themselves and erasing their pasts, they denied future generations the full story of their remarkable adaptability and strength. Only now are we beginning to understand the true scope of their accomplishments and the price they paid for them. The glamour was real, but it was earned through struggle, intelligence, and courage that Hollywood never quite captured. Behind every glittering dress and practiced smile was a woman who understood that survival required more than just looking pretty. It demanded being smarter, tougher, and more resourceful than anyone expected frontier women to be. What surprised you most about these saloon girl secrets? Did you know about the arsenic makeup or the elaborate financial schemes? Drop a comment below and let me know which part of their story shocked you the most. If you enjoyed learning the real history behind the Hollywood myths, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got plenty more untold stories about the Wild West that will change how you think about America's frontier days. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.